Hello, hello! Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina, and this is where I'm reading through the enormous library books that you see behind me. Well, sort of. My camera is shifted. There it is. There you go. Enormous. And then I give you a quick synopsis of what I've read and tell you what I think about them. So if you like books, just aren't sure what to read next, hit that subscribe button, like and share my videos, and let me know what you think in the comments. I am wrapping up my reading modules on the 1930s with this week's book of the week, New Deal or Raw Deal, How FDR's Economic Legacy Has Damaged America by Burton Folsom Jr. The accompanying cocktail is called a Vodka Paralyzer, which may not be very PC, but was very funny to me when I found it. It is 4 ounces of soda, 1 ounce of coffee liqueur, 1.5 ounces of vodka, 2 ounces of milk, and a maraschino cherry to garnish. Not sure about milk and soda, but we'll see how this goes. So let's do this. So I knew I wanted to round out my study of the Great Depression and FDR, whose policies likely expanded the impact and length of the Great Depression, with Burton Folsom's book, which I read many years ago, but of course reread so that I could give a fresh review on this particular channel. Starting with, what do I say, 4 ounces of soda. I went with Pepsi, obviously whatever your cola of choice is. And up until the first time I read Folsom's book, I was with the historian line, which was that FDR was one of the greatest presidents ever. And that's what you're taught in school, right? And the teachers must know, they're the teachers, and this is history. And it's how every history book reports on him. He's the greatest president, one of the greatest, if not the greatest presidents ever. I mean, even last week's book, which went out of its way to bring up his failings, used those failings to highlight that no, he's just another human. He's just one of, just another human like all of us, prone to human failings, not as an object lesson of what an abject failure he was, both as a president and as a human. This book is not that. You can't just pour in, you got to do the beer pour at an angle. 4 ounces. We're going to let that die down before I add anything to it. This book critically examines the New Deal in general and FDR specifically, and it tells an entirely different story from what last week's book was. Was it Ted Morgan? Ted Morgan's book, yes. Now, Amity Shlaes addresses parts of the problems with the New Deal in her book, The Forgotten Man. Folsom provides even more details, specifically highlighting the failings of the New Deal policies, the failings of FDR as a president, as a human being, and as a legacy, his legacy. Now, the immortal J.K. Rowling has famously said, "I do not walk around my house thinking about my legacy. What a pompous way to live." After reading this book, I doubt that thought ever crossed FDR's mind. Pretty sure he loves the legacy of being the greatest president ever. Probably even loves the damage he's done to the country long run because, hey, it was built on his policies, and I don't think he ever once reflected on just how bad those policies were. When it's coffee liqueur. Now, Folsom does address the myth of FDR's rise to power and what caused the Great Depression. I mean, basically, the first couple of chapters are just a Cliff's Notes version of the books that I read over the last month. I literally could have saved myself a month of reading if I'd started with this book, including the 774 pages I read last week, because there's one whole chapter that basically just sums up everything I learned. What do I say? 1 ounce of coffee liqueur. Like a alchemist here. Now, Folsom's breakdown of what caused the Great Depression does include a solid description of what exactly went wrong with the Smoot-Hawley tariff, why it was so catastrophic, the industries that were impacted, and the global impact of that tariff. He covers the retaliatory tariffs that were sent out by other countries and why that added and contributed to the Great Depression. The NRA, the National Recovery Act, not the National Rifle Association, not the NRA that people love to hate, although they should hate this NRA. So the NRA, the National Recovery Act, FDR's pride and joy, the one that got booted out at the Supreme Court level, thanks to the Schechters, which we learned all about in Amity Shlaes' book. The NRA allowed the bureaucratic coalitions to fix prices, and these weren't just the bureaucrats of, it's not like FDR just picked his favorite people. He picked his favorite industries, the leaders of those industries being the top producers, and let them set the prices. Now, can anybody imagine why it might be a bad idea to let the big businesses set the prices? I'm sure most people would probably have an idea of that, but let's just see if the non-economist historians will reach the same conclusions that normal thinking people would. See, the larger corporations set the prices for which products could be sold, so the little guy had no chance to compete. In the 1930s, the example from the book, The NRA, that he used was the tire industry. Well, let's get this cocktail mixed up so I have something to drink while I'm going through this. All right. Mix all that together. Let's see how milk goes on top of this. 2 ounces of milk. 2 ounces of milk. So 100 years ago, the major tire manufacturers were basically the same as today. You had Goodyear, you had Goodrich, you had Firestone. There's more tire manufacturers now, but those were the three big ones back in the day, and very telling that 100 years later they are still the three big ones. Those three wrote the NRA tire code, which resulted in the price of tires soaring. Because, hey, they can set any price they want, that tires must be sold at this price, right? This results, which in turn, because, you need tires for cars, this hurt American car exports because that cost was carried out to the customers. We weren't able to export as many cars. And also meant that fewer Americans could afford to buy the car because suddenly the car is a lot more expensive because tires cost more. So did everything else, but the tires, we're just going to stick with this example. Oh, wow. Was not at all sure about adding coffee or milk to soda. Probably wouldn't do it all on its own, but this is not bad. It's pretty good, actually. In the meantime, locally owned tire companies like Ferris Tire and Rubber Company in Ohio, which locally employed 1,000 people, couldn't compete. And this company had managed to survive the first several years of the Depression because they were a well-known, locally owned and operated company. Then came the NRA, which demanded tires be sold at a fixed price. Since Ferris could no longer legally sell at a discount, because discounts were legally prohibited under the NRA code, the big national tire chains, the ones who set the price, advised everyone to just buy their products because, hey, they could be replaced anywhere in the country. Direct quote from the book. Ferris put it this way: the government deliberately raised our prices up towards the prices at which the big companies wanted to sell, at which they could make a profit, where more easily, with much less loss, they could come down and get us, and where, bound by NRA decrees, we could not use lower prices, although we could have lowered them and still made a decent profit. They were prohibited from selling at a lower price, because the government said it should be sold at this price. So the NRA raised the prices of everything, and everyone suffered for it. The Agricultural Adjustment Act, so AAA, not the AAA that everyone loves, the Auto Association of America, that benefits to this day, but the other AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Act, was an extremely select group of people. Was for the benefit of an extremely select group of people, farmers, right? And that AAA benefits to this day that extremely select group of people. Nothing against farmers. I love farmers. I enjoy food. I enjoy eating. Farmers provide a lot of that food. In fact, they provide all of it. Arguably, none of the food I eat would be possible without farmers, including everything I drank today, right? You have potatoes, coffee, cows, high fructose corn syrup. None of it would be possible without farmers, so nothing against farmers. But AAA was the next step in Hoover's Federal Farm Board. Now, the FFB set the price of wheat at 80 cents per bushel and cotton at 20 cents per pound. Now, can anyone guess what the unintended consequences of setting a market price like that would be for farmers? I mean, we saw with the NRA how fixing a price upset the industrial sector. In the farming sector, once the farmers knew that they would be paid for their crops regardless, they all started planting only cotton and wheat, which flooded the market, obviously. This led to a massive surplus that could not be sold because of the Smoot-Hawley tariff, which resulted in retaliatory tariffs where no country would buy our surplus wheat and cotton. So the government had to go in and buy all of this and couldn't do anything with it. But because that law was on the books, the farmers kept planting wheat and cotton because, hey, they were guaranteed to sell it to the government at those rates. No problem there, right? Well, AAA continued those policies and, of course, paid the farmers not to farm land at a whopping $10 per acre not to farm. So if a farmer had 200-acre farm and accepted AAA funding to not farm, say, 40 acres of it, that was a guaranteed $400 to just let the land lay there and not do anything. That's about $9,500 in today's currency, and it's an absolute fortune in 1930s dollars. The Works Progress Administration, Federal Emergency Relief Administration, Tennessee Valley Authority. He attacks, Folsom, not he, let's just be specific here, Folsom attacks each of those in turn and talks about just how devastating the long-term consequences of those things were. The WPA, for example, was used to literally buy votes, like literally pay people to vote for Roosevelt. The graft and corruption that came out of this administration was off the charts. The FERA, Federal Emergency Relief Act administration, was used to send out-of-work vets to build bridges in the Florida Keys, which sounds great until you find out they did it during hurricane season and failed to provide adequate shelter from hurricanes for the vets. A lot of people died there. The TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, here's another fun quote from the book. The concentrating of benefits among the 2% of the population living in the Tennessee Valley had to be done by taxing away wealth from the other 98%. As a result of this, Tennessee had actually lagged behind nearby states in economic development. I think to this day it's one of the most undeveloped states in the nation because they have no motivation to do so. I mean, thank you, Big Daddy government. Folsom brings some harsh truths about Social Security, minimum wage, labor relations, FDR's tax plans. He addresses all of these. He addresses FDR's lying. This was addressed in last week's book. Only the author of last week's book kind of downplayed it, like FDR only really lied to his mother, and that only because she was so overbearing and Oedipal. Apparently, FDR's penchant for playing with the truth was well known to his cabinet members and those nearest and dearest to him. He was a right bastard to Eleanor. There's some lovely quotes in there about how he talked down to her, and everybody just kind of rolled with it in the name of party unity. Rolled with it. They're like, well, yes, he's lying. We know he's lying, but we're in charge, so let's keep that power. This is incidentally probably not unique to the Democrats, certainly not in the last 100 years, but he points out how FDR was kind of the first to really make it okay to lie to we the people because we let him keep getting away with it by accepting that sweet, sweet government dollars to keep voting him into power. He covers how FDR basically bought the election of 1936 and then immediately blew the goodwill with his court packing scheme. The book last week made it seem like the reason the Democrats fell apart following the 1936 election was because they broke into factions that couldn't pull together for the good of the party. Folsom makes it very clear that what the party was not united behind was FDR's blatant power grab and his court packing scheme. I mean, nobody was okay with this. The only one who thought it was a good idea was FDR. The entire rest of the country, even the people, like Gallup polls from the time, were like, yeah, we're heading down the road towards dictatorship and tyranny. And so it's not surprising that his court packing scheme failed so spectacularly. I'm going to climb onto a soapbox here for a minute, and we're going to talk a little bit about the minimum wage. With the, quite a bit of what this book covers are the unintended consequences, except that I'm not so sure they are unintended. He covers one of the first minimum wage laws, which actually wasn't part of FDR's package. It was the Minimum Wage Act of 1918, which mandated that women must be paid a minimum of $71.50 per month, which is approximately $1,400 in today's currency, which sounds great, right? Women must be paid. Hey, I'm all for that. Women should be paid. I agree. Except the law only applied to women. The logical outcome of this is that women were then laid off in droves because you didn't have to pay men that wage. You could pay men $35 a month, literally half what was mandated to pay women. And so women were laid off, men were hired in their place. And as the author points out, and we're seeing this play out in real time on the nightly news, when the laws applied to both men and women, a la a mandated $20 per hour wage, then people are fired because the company goes under as it cannot afford to pay those wages. Or the company automates, which is a lot of how Amazon offsets that $20 per hour that they support paying their people. Okay, let's get off the soapbox. He covers how the IRS how FDR used the IRS to persecute those who displeased him, and how his overhaul of the patronage system, that same patronage system that resulted in the assassination of President Garfield, FDR used that to secure his elections. Basically, after the first one, he used patronage to control the country. He covers how FDR's policies paralyzed the economy and, by extension, the country. Hence the cocktail choice. The Vodka Paralyzer was not a reference to him being paralyzed. It could be. I almost made this one last week till Rum Swizzle fell in my lap. Anyways, this book provides a whole lot of food for thought. It's a very fast read. Folsom is an engaging author, and he cuts through a lot of the background noise that surrounds FDR and his legacy, and shines a very bright light on the things that should be used to damn FDR to the very bottom of the presidential rankings. And actually do place him at the bottom of the rankings if you're an economist. Historians still worship at the altar of FDR. And unfortunately, historians write the history books that are used to teach history. You have to get out of school and find your own books to read to get the other side of the story. And I highly recommend this book to get the other side of that story. And that's it for this week. If you like what you saw, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next Sunday. Bye.